some people with departures. And so we're going to record this just in case some people have other things that need to be getting done tonight. We also are going to send a follow-up email. So don't scurry around and try to write on the links or write down all the links and that kind of thing. We will make sure that you get all of this information. We do ask because we have some material that we need to get through. Plus, we want to have some time for breakout sessions. We do ask that you hold your questions to the end or put them in the chat. That way we get to everything or we follow up on those things that we need to look into further. So Martha's driving the PowerPoint, so I'm going to ask her to go to the next one. Most of you have done it already. Go ahead and change to your first name, your area team, and then your volunteer role. I get it. Some of you could not fit all of that in the box, all of your different roles, but kind of what role are you representing here tonight? I did see one. We've got some support volunteers that popped up. And so go ahead and change that. And we're going to start right off with kind of a question about you and your team. And so Martha's going to launch our poll. The two questions are rate your team's performance for your NH23 orientations. This one, you can only pick one thing. And then the other one is what would help you to run an even better orientation for NH24, and you can pick as many as you want. On my screen, you kind of have to scroll down a little bit to get all of the options. And we know there might be other things. And so go ahead and fill out your poll. It should have popped up and then we'll see what the answers will be.
All right, there's still some people completing. How many do we have on the call? 20? Okay. Maybe we have about 12 participated. Okay. So more volunteers being involved is a big one so far. Is anyone else wanting to complete, or I can release? Looks like most people think it's okay, but there's room for improvement. No one barely managed. All the people who barely managed didn't come to the call tonight. That's great. All right, it looks like everyone's completed, so we'll end the poll and share results. Let me know if you can see them because I can't when I'm sharing my screen.
Yes,
can you see
we
them?
can see them, or at least I can see. Yep.
I'd be interested to, if somebody wants to come off mute, anybody who filled out other, and let us know what were you thinking when you said other?
I was thinking monies.
Money, yep. So I had funds as one of, this is so interesting. I had funds as one of the options, but because we can't provide that, I took it off and I put other, thinking somebody would pick it. So yeah. Any others? Pick other and have something different? Oh, we got some reverb.
Yeah, I noticed Jan put money and transport, which transport a lot of times is limited because of money. But yes, definitely something we in Orientation Advisory Group have talked multiple times about stipend and how much money we get to help support our students.
Yeah. Well, it's good to see this. It's really helpful to us to see what's going on. The fact that you don't need more guidance from staff and the Orientation Advisory Group is sort of good. You're not struggling in that regard. Room for improvement. Hopefully we'll give you some tools tonight that will help you with that improvement, but always reach out if you feel like there's something you need. Better tech tools. That was my passive aggressive dig at Global Inc. because it's a pain. But hopefully there's areas of improvement going on there too. So great. Thank you for completing that. It's helpful.
All right, our next slide is a quick agenda, I believe, Martha. And yep. I'm going to go through it quick. We're going to talk about a calendar and then some new orientation materials. The next one up for all of us is host family orientations and then arrivals. Then, of course, we have a few of you might be involved with study abroad. We'll touch quickly on the study abroad pre-departure orientation. talk about some teamwork, which is those volunteers you all pointed out, and then we'll summarize all the resources. That way everything's on the same, on this, like everybody's got it all linked together. So again, don't worry about taking too many notes. You'll get this presentation with all the links in it. Thank you, Susan, for that. All that chat is great. I can't read it all right now because we want to make sure we pay attention to time. The thing we want to talk about first is make sure that we're all on the same page with like calendar. And I talked about the next thing up is host family orientation. Most of you, or I hope you have that scheduled. We're going to talk more about that. Chris is going to talk about that in a little bit. Then we have that arrival orientation. That's, again, something we need to do within 7 days of the student arrival. We'll have some more resources because I get it. Sponsored programs don't all come at the same time. And then not all of the teams are lucky enough to place for first arrival. And so that's a difficult time sometimes. So sometimes we need multiple events for multiple arrivals. The next one is post-arrival orientation. Then, of course, we have mid-year orientation. And the one I really want to stress is it's not pre-departure or whatever we used to call it. It is now called end of stay orientation. That's changed about 2 years ago. It's about 6 to 8 weeks before departures. And then the one in the other blue is the departure logistics webinar, which officially is not an orientation. So some of you may be doing that departure logistics webinar, or at least helping with it, but that is not an orientation. And so orientation advisory group actually doesn't have a lot to do with that. And so just know that we probably will not touch on that at any of these sessions. And so, but this is the calendar. If you think about it, I think we will talk about a calendar and getting one of those. So as you get host families through the process, you can give it to them. And so, but this is what we're talking about when we start mentioning which one of the orientations we're going to go over tonight. All right, next slide, Martha, which is you, I think.
All right. Yeah, we're going to dive into some new materials. So we're pretty excited. We're launching quite a few new materials ready for NH24, and we kind of wanted to save them for this call. So those who show up for this call get to sort of see them firsthand. And then later on this week, we're going to be sending out emails and posting news articles and sort of launching to the broader group. So I am going to sort of slide my screen around a bit. I hope it's not too headachy, just to show you some of these things in real time. But the first one is the new educational framework. And you can see if it's too small to see it in the upper right, that's just a sort of glimpse of it. And every few years, AFS as an organization re-looks at their educational goals. And they've done that recently and decided to really focus on active global citizenship, which is really the core of the student learning journey. And it's really what we're doing in all of the experiential learning that our students are going through is they're learning to become active global citizens. So again, it has, 4 sort of realms, if you like, areas of development for students: value and belonging, inquiring critically, taking action, understanding and relating. So it's really just building on the previous goals, but what's important to understand about this, and when we share it, hopefully you'll read through and sort of really digest it, is that it is the backbone of what we do. It's the backbone of orientation content. It's the backbone of the student learning journey, of the monthly check-ins. If any of you look at those talking points that you're given for the monthly check-ins, the liaisons are given, that's also based on our framework for active global citizenship. So that's the first thing that we'll share with you. In addition, we do have new arrival and post-arrival orientation leader guides. And that's sort of the big change, if I can get them over here, is that we're going back to a leader guide format. When COVID hit, we went very much for the slideshow because everything went remote. And we have heard from many, many orientation volunteers that they really preferred the leader guide format. So we have gone back to that. It's not going to be quite such a book. I know they were always PDFs, and this will also be a PDF. They're not quite so long because it is 2024. There's lots of links. So rather than a ton of pages, we've kept it rather concise, but we do have a lot of links in here. So the first couple of pages of all of them will be consistent. It'll tell you what the goals are, what the objectives are. There'll be an agenda. That again is live links to go down into the other pages. and there'll be a lot of preparation materials that you can click on, you can print out, you can have on your screen, whatever you're most comfortable with as far as presentation. I know a lot of people still like to print things out. I do too. So you'll have that option. But having, you know, a guide to the student learning journey, for example, that you can read through, familiarize yourself with as you're preparing for the orientation. And then handouts that will be required in the orientation are right here. Materials for the student resources. There's going to be a lot in here to prepare you. One thing I wanted to mention, because it's at the bottom of this page, is consistency. It's something that the Orientation Advisory Group has been talking a lot about, and it's a place that we struggle as an organization, certainly AFS-USA, because we have so many area teams across such a wide area, and everyone kind of does their own thing. And we're really trying to focus on consistency. So we know that across the board, students are hearing pretty much the same thing. Obviously with a slightly different voice, and you might decide to do a different energizer or icebreaker, but generally speaking, the content is the same. So we do ask that information is not changed, but that it's added to, so that you download and save these. And if you want to add something about your local area team, local laws, you know, things that are important locally for students to learn, that you add that to this information. But this is what it will be. There'll be different sessions. Oh, and back here, just real quickly, there are still slides. For people who want to use slides, there will be slides in addition, but that will be a piece of the orientation, not the whole presentation. So you can choose to run slides, or you can choose to just, you know, have the slides as a printout for yourself to refer to. But each section will have a slide to refer to. But it really helps the facilitator with a lot of detail. So when you look at each one, it's bullet point detail about how you should run each activity with any links that you might need for that activity. So I won't go through the whole thing because all the scrolling will give us all headaches. But that's generally what it looks like. I just wanted you to have a visual so you recognize it when you see it, but that hopefully you'll sit and really spend some time digesting before arrival. We've got plenty of time. And then post-arrival, as you can see, it looks the same. It's got the same format. Again, with objectives, goals, a breakdown of the agenda, a bit more meaty. Obviously, arrival orientation is a bit shorter. As far as content is concerned, there's not a huge amount of intercultural learning content that students can absorb when they first arrive. So it's a bit shorter, whereas post-arrival really gets a bit more into cultural adaptation and coping strategies. It talks about being part of the host community, talking about how we communicate across different cultures. Again, you've got slides, you've got various different materials that you can reference, and then dive into each of the sessions again. So it's going to be a very familiar format as we get each one launched and out to you, and you plan your orientations and you get used to them. It'll become a very familiar format, we hope. So those are the new orientation layouts. And then the next, we have two more things. The next one is another help and learning. So for any of you that have been following, we've been churning out help and learning resources quite regularly. I'm going to try and bring that over now. Here we go. So as you know, you have help and learning for volunteers, which you've had for a very long time. This isn't working. Second. There we go. Just a quick refresh. So we have help and learning for volunteers, which is taking a while to launch. There you go. Very familiar, obviously, with the conduct orientations button over here. And then you also have help and learning for host families, which is linked down here, which is really easy for you to access. Something we share with host families when they first become a host family. And then also in the newsletter, we send them frequently back here to reference different materials. And then we're going to be launching this week AFS-USA for hosted participants. So this is sort of a big deal when it loads, because we've always shared handbooks with our students. We've shared Welcome to the USA and Safety Tips handbooks with our students about 3 months before they arrive. They're shared with the partner shares them with the student and the parents, and they get to read about how to prepare to come to the US. We've now put this in an online format, which will allow them not only to have it before they come on program, but also while they're on program. So orientation orientation volunteers can mention it at orientations, liaisons can refer to it during their monthly check-ins, and students will have a resource they can go to if they have a question about traveling on program. What are the rules and regulations? Whatever their questions might be, you'll have the support of an online resource that they can have on their phones and they can refer to whenever they need to. So we're very excited about this. If you don't already know, there obviously the host family one, there also is one for study abroad. And that launched about a month ago, and that's for students who are going abroad to prepare for their program and for their parents as well. So that's all our help and learnings, and we are very excited to be launching them. And then the very last new resource here that I want to share is a guide for the student learning journey for Yes and Flex students. Yes and Flex inbound students, so our hosted Yes and Flex students, many of which are not recruited by AFS-USA. It's been very difficult for us to share the student learning journey with them because they don't technically belong to us until they're here. But it's very difficult for orientation volunteers to stand up at an arrival orientation and talk about the student learning journey when you have a group of people that don't know what you're talking about. So that's been a challenge for us that we've worked through, and we will now be sharing the first modules of the student learning journey with the Yes and Flex students at arrival in the US. So they'll get to hear about it at their DC orientation. I think some of them actually are coming into a Newark orientation for NH24, but they will hear about it. The staff will have this handout. They'll explain how they can access it, and they'll have those first few weeks to work on those modules should they choose. It is optional. It's always been optional for students. We really encourage them to do it because we think it has extremely valuable intercultural learning tools that help support their experience. And we just feel like, the Yes and Flex students will dive right in because of the kind of students they are. So we're very excited about that, and we'll also share that handout with you. So if and when you talk about it at arrival orientation, you'll have a nice resource to refer to. So those are our major new announcements for materials, and we hope that you'll spend some time with them, study them, get back to us if you have any questions, if anything's not clear, but we are excited to share them with you tonight. All right, let's jump to the next slide. And Chris, I think you're going to talk about host family orientation.
Yes, thank you so much, Martha. So I wanted to talk a little bit about host family orientations, and just by a thumbs up, how many of you on your teams have already hosted a host family orientation? Has anybody already completed one? One person? Does anybody have any planned upcoming in the next? Okay, a couple more thumbs up. Okay, wonderful. So what we want to talk about is really to plan to have more than one, because we know that right now we have host families signed up to host, and they're all set for their students to arrive. But then maybe a month from now we'll recruit another host family, and they may have missed the host family orientation. So it is important to have more than one host family orientation if possible, and to try to do it in person if possible. So of those people that are planning their host family orientation, but with a thumbs up, how many are planning in person? Lynn, Paige, Beth, okay, great. And so I just want to ask, for those of you planning an in-person host family orientation, what value or what benefits do you see by having it in person? Mary or Paige, Lynn, Beth, could you share?
I can share if that's all right.
Thank you.
So we had actually previously moved to virtual for this several recent years, partly because we have a very widespread area team. I'm in Minnesota and we cover a good chunk of the state. So it was hard to get everyone together if they were, if they had a 4-hour drive to come in. But for the last couple of years, we've heard a lot of feedback from host families about how they miss getting together in person, and we used to have monthly in-person chapter meetings, and they miss that connection, even though we had canceled them because no one was coming to them. So this year we're shifting back to in-person to try to reconnect and get that in-person energy going in our chapter again.
Thank you. So I think that's so valuable what you said, that the connection with other host families, and it really creates a little support group for them, right? Like you may have experienced host families or new time host families, and so they have a built-in support system and someone, to go to if they have questions. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's one of the biggest benefits of having in person. But of course, if it's impossible, because 4-hour drive one way is quite a commitment, we could also offer online, and even if those subsequent could also be done that way. So really, we want to allow, like when we do have the host family orientations, time for families to get to know each other, to mingle, to socialize, so that they do start to feel that connection with each other. And then I did want to share that we do have some new for onboarding new host families, move and replacement host families, because beyond like the host families that are going to start hosting a student when the student first arrives, we know that throughout the year students may move and they may go to another host family. And so there is a concise paper, resource for you to use for those subsequent host family orientations. So it's pretty much like a one-page intro, and then there's pages that you can leave behind with the family. So this would be very nice to use when you have those subsequent, or the, like the one-offs that you need to do throughout the hosting cycle. And then our favorite, making sure that we log the attendance in Global Link. So I know it can be a little bit tricky. So if you need any help with that, feel free to reach out to your RFS and they can help you with that, or, kind of walk you through the process. Okay, so now we're going to go to arrival orientation. And it's a little bit early, I know, but August 7th is going to be here before we know it. And we're going to have our first students arriving. And many of our sponsored program students are also arriving right around that time. And they can arrive in increments. So the one thing we want to mention here is to make sure that you review the materials well in advance. As Martha mentioned earlier, all of the orientation materials have been revised and updated, and there's great resources out there, great material. And we want to make sure that there is consistency across the country with the arrival orientation. And again, always best to have this, make every effort to have in-person events. So it's always best to host this in person. And we're excited that there is the new leader guide. So that will be very helpful in working with your orientation and presenting that. And then one thing is also to make sure you add in any local laws or anything relevant to your area. I know, some of us might not live in an area where maybe we need to think about, something as simple as sunscreen. And, if you're in a more sunny area, and you have a student that's just arrived from very far north, we don't want them to get sunburned. So simple things like that, just like little simple safety things, can be considered very informative for our students when they first arrive, and maybe something that they didn't think. So just thinking about the local information, local curfews that there might be, and any local laws. And then what we want to do here is go into a breakout room. And our breakout room question is, what is the one activity at your at your arrival orientation that you think, Martha, I'm sorry, are we doing host family orientation or arrival orientation for the breakout room?
It can be either. We really just want
Okay.
people to share with each other, and just what's the one thing that stands out to you that is really valuable to your host families at your HFO or to your students at your arrival orientation. So again, it's getting you guys together, it's getting you sharing ideas. We just want you to have that opportunity. It's going to be fairly quick and informal. We would just want you guys to get together, and then when we come back, we can maybe pop some good ideas in the chat if something really great, came up in the room. I'm just a little slow on my connection, I think. I'm sorry about that. So I'm just going to throw you, I think, into 4 rooms. Join.
Welcome back. If everybody could just take a few moments and put some of what you discussed, that one great idea, one thing in the chat so everybody can see what was discussed in your breakout room. I know in the room I was in, there were a lot of great ideas. So emphasize that it's a learning program, not a travel program, non-dominant hand exercise. I'm just reading a few things. Get everyone up and moving.
Learning,
Anybody
not
else?
travel.
Yeah, in my group, somebody said that they start their arrival orientation. The first slide says, comparison is the thief of joy, and that you should make this your own experience. So I really
love
liked
that.
that. I wrote it down. I loved it.
Comparison is the thief of joy. I love that. I wonder how many of them understand it that first day. Maybe show it again at post-arrival, and it has a whole new meaning. Emergency, non-emergency slides. I'm glad somebody brought that up. Beth brought that up, because I have that on my list to revamp. It's very old. When you look at them, they're very dated. So I know that volunteers love that as an extra activity, but I do think it could be updated. And I was going to collaborate with the support staff and ask them, like, what are the 8 things that you've seen to be most prevalent in the last couple of years that maybe we can update it to be relevant to the issues that students are going through. So yeah, is it an emergency? I think I'm glad you brought that up. We will be revamping that and adding it in before these students arrive. Need to work to make the most of your relationship with the family.
Know they're not alone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, family relationships. I know that's a big hurdle for lots of teams.
Shell wrote, record brief intro on phone and replay at the end of the session. And
I think
Allison,
that the host family comment, it's all about setting expectations, right? And that's something we've also worked really hard to do. We mentioned this in the last call, but we do create welcome videos now that are sent to the partners to share with the students and parents. That's all part of the expectation setting. I know from working in the field, you get kids that come and say, well, Italy told me I could move the first week. It's all about setting those expectations for what that can and will happen on programs. So yeah, I agree. Talking about that host family relationship early is important.
Addressing entitlement issues right up front, need to set appropriate expectations and don't demand a big house, freedom with no curfews, etc. Talk with the kids about expressing appreciation of what their host parents do for them, saying thank you frequently. All great ideas.
Lynn also said, speaking of travel, telling your host parents about the new rule that host parents can't share a hotel room with their students.
Yeah, that's a big one. I know that it's ruffled a lot of feathers. So we've put that into a lot of different places, so everyone's aware of it. But that is an important one.
Okay,
Expressing
thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Just really quickly, I'm going to mention we do have a guide in the orientation section about teaching kids about gratitude. So if you want to add that as an additional topic at one of your orientations, we know how difficult that is and how important it is when kids are coming from a culture where they don't think they have to say thanks to mom for getting a ride. And it can create tension in the family without the student even knowing. We do have a really great handout for that to do as an activity. So do look for that, because again, it can prevent problems. Great.
Astra just posted for post-arrival. They asked their students why their host family is hosting and what do they want to get out of it.
Great. All right, should we move on? I hope that was valuable to you guys. We do, as part of this call, want you to get together and share best practices and connect with each other and communicate and not be in silos. So I hope that was helpful. All right, next slide. So we'll touch briefly on study abroad. I know we discussed it. For anyone who was on the last one of these calls, we did discuss it, so we're not going to spend too long. Can we do a quick show of hands for any volunteers on the call that run outbound student orientations? I know it's usually a smaller number. 1, 2, 2, 3, 4. Okay, great. So it's a few. I don't want, if there's no one, then we'd keep it even shorter. As I mentioned at the last call, for anyone who wasn't on it, we know about the confusion about how to figure out who to invite. We know that it's difficult to know when they're leaving, what program they're on. It's been a challenge for so long. It's amazing anyone can find who their students are, quite frankly. But we do have a ton of changes going on behind the scenes in My AFS in the Study Abroad widget. Taking a little longer than I would like, but once they're in place, they'll be great. I know you probably can't see that screenshot, but it'll have little badges. It'll tell you if they're a CBYX, if they're a NISLE kid. There'll be check marks for whether they need an interview, whether they've been interviewed. You'll be able to check off if they attended an orientation and not have to go into Global Link. It's going to be fabulous. So it will be in place in time to pilot for SH25. So we'll get to sort of figure it out in SH25 and then really use it full on in NH25. But they're very exciting changes, and we know that the problems exist. So if you do need help figuring out who your students are and when they're leaving, we can always help with that. So do send us an email, because frustration in the depths of Global Link is not a good place to be. I was interested if anyone wants to, any of those 3 or 4 people want to pop on and say, who organizes your PDOs? We've been talking with the Study Abroad Advisory Group a little bit about the overlap with Study Abroad volunteers and orientation volunteers in this regard. Because some teams, Astrid, do you want to tell us on your team?
Actually, we were lucky this year because so it was one volunteer who organizes the sending orientations, and we were in the same building with the end of stay, our hosted students who had the end of stay orientation. And so we were mostly separate, but then we had some overlap, and it was actually really helpful, I think, especially for the sending students to have an opportunity to talk to the currently hosted students, and also the hosted students felt like they were a good resource for sending. And the parents really enjoyed meeting the hosted students. I mean, there's actually very little overlap normally. And so we were lucky that we were able to combine 2 events and then have like lunch. And we actually had a panel for a little while where the hosted students, could be asked questions. And I think everybody liked to be able to be a resource for the other group.
That's great. So you were able to pull your resources as volunteers as well, with regards to sending volunteers and orientation. That's great. And I think we've heard that more and more, especially now that the study abroad numbers are a bit smaller than they were a number of years ago, that it makes sense if you're going to have an event to sort of combine events. I think it's a win-win. Anyone else have any input on who's running those pre-departure orientations?
We also do it at the same time, but it's the small group sessions are actually conducted by the sending, but we do a lot of interaction with the hosted students.
It's the same here for our team. We always try to have the pre-departure at the same time as either the mid-year or the pre-return orientation for the currently hosted students, so that they can interact and we can have a student panel.
Great. I mean, it sounds like we almost should have that be the way that PDOs happen. It seems to be happening so frequently. Awesome. And so that kind of answers the other question I had there, which is how are you coping with the smaller numbers? And I think that kind of is part of it, right? If you've got 1 or 2 students that are going abroad, it's hard to really call it an orientation. We have been trying not to do the virtual option as much as possible. Susan knows, she helped us facilitate some of the virtual ones last year, and we really want students to connect with the local team. I mean, the benefits. they may become volunteers in the future. They feel connected, they feel a part of something. You know, study abroad students will often tell us they feel very alone and am I the only one doing this crazy thing? And, you know, so we do have a series of webinars that they can jump on, you know, to learn about going abroad. And that helps them to see there's other students doing this, but connecting at the local level is just invaluable. So as much as that can be in person, even with smaller numbers, we really are trying to promote that. We did, however, have one virtual event before the first departures were leaving for a few students who were just so geographically apart from any area team that we did need to run that. And we recorded it. It was excellent. We had a great volunteer helping us to run that, as well as Chris. And so we did record it. So if you have any students in your team that are not able to attend a PDO and haven't had anything at all in that regard, then we can share that with you to share with them as sort of a last resort. So just wanted to let you know that. And we will keep you posted on the new updates to Help and Learning.
Sarah just made a great comment. She said she thought the parent section of the PDO that they led this year was some of the best interactions that she's had with families in a couple of years, and that in person does make a huge difference.
Wonderful. Yeah, you can't replicate those conversations and those connections. Great. Awesome. All right, let's move on to the next slide. We're 9 minutes left until 9 o'clock, and I'll hand over to you, Donna, to talk about teams.
Sure. So instead of A team, we said O team for our orientation volunteer team. One of the things you all talked about is having more orientation volunteers. And so one of the things I just noticed is if we put end of stay with pre-departure, we just needed more volunteers at that event. So how are we doing that? And so we want to make sure they, you know, think about your team. Who do you have that are strong facilitators? The other thing is, and I notice we have at least one support person on this call, is get your support volunteers involved, because there are those chances that you might have to talk to students. They can kind of listen and see if there's any problems that they need to address. If you can get your returnees involved, I love the idea of these two together, because then those students that are, I'll go over that in just a second, Linda, on the foundations question. But getting your returnees involved, if you do those two orientations together, they're already kind of know some of the volunteers before they leave. And so maybe getting them to orientations after they come back would be great. And then, of course, we are going to have to start stressing some of the difficult topics a little bit more. And so having that volunteer like Jan Feldman, who just lay it all out there and aren't intimidated by it. Some of it might not go over well with host families, only because here in the US, we tend to not talk about some of those, like sextortion and things like that. And so making sure we have a volunteer there that's completely comfortable talking about those topics. And then I know Emily volunteered to help anyone that is willing to learn about Global Link. We know that entering attendance can be a bit clunky, partly because we don't do it that often, and so we forget between each one. And so having that Global Link expert, or that person that enters, even that doesn't even have to be someone who's there, as long as they get the sheet. The other thing is, make sure you are checking with My AFS for new volunteers in your team. Our team had some issues with sending out full team emails. So double check your emails too, because some of them had some sort of filter on them and they weren't actually getting all the emails. Divide up the tasks. I think we're going to show a real quick screenshot of that orientation task, that Excel sheet or that Google sheet that we talked about. And so having that, utilizing volunteer skill sets, I simply asked one of the volunteers that I knew lived near one of our next locations. And I said, would you be willing to coordinate the catering for it? It's our volunteer celebration. And he was like, sure, I know all the restaurants. But then that goes to that personal ask, is making sure that you do ask people. share those help and learning resources with new volunteers, and then encourage them to take Foundations. So Foundations is a volunteer form of the student learning journey. And so it really does talk about intercultural learning. It is something that gets people experience. They get to talk with other volunteers sometimes from all over the world, if that's the one they take. And so just making sure that you get that cultural knowledge before you go into some of the orientations is helpful. And so Foundations, if you have any volunteers that are willing to take it, I think reaching out to Martha would be a great thing. They can sign up for it. And as we talk about this, I would be remiss to not say we need more orientation volunteers on our advisory group. And so we will be reaching out to a few more people and doing that personal ask. So I do ask that you kind of think about it. We've had some retirements on our orientation advisory group, and it really is kind of like on your team. You volunteer as much as you're able to. And so like that volunteer I said, he's really good he can coordinate that food, but he's not going to be there all day at an orientation. And so finding, even on our advisory group, you help with what you can. And so it's as little or as a lot as you make it. And so we're always looking for more members on our orientation advisory group. On Help and Learning, if you click on volunteer at the national level, there is an interest, there's kind of an explanation of what goes on for each of the advisory groups, and then there's an interest form on there. And so if you're interested, go on there, and if not, you may get a personal ask from me sometime soon, because we really do need to have some more members, because doing things like this does take quite a crew of making sure we get all of the volunteers around AFS to get the resources they need.
And we'll add a link for Foundations for anyone who wants to enroll, and also for the OAG sheet too. So we'll add those when we send all the resources out, which is a good segue. Next slide. Slide in resources, Donna? I can't remember who was doing this slide.
Yeah, I think I can go over them really quick, and there's a couple of closing comments because I think this is our last slide, right? Except for questions. So this will come with all the hyperlinks in it when you get the presentation. Just a reminder, there's tons of things on Help and Learning. There's a Conduct Orientation Help and Learning page, which has everything on it. And then there you can break out into arrival orientation, host family orientation. There are those quick guides that Chris talked about on onboarding new, move, and replacement families. As much as we'd love to dream that we will never need these, let's be realistic, we do. There's the new educational framework. There's that Yes and Flex student learning journey guide, which is that catch-up guide for those students as they get here, so they have that opportunity also. And then of course there's the information on how to log your orientations in the activity module. There's some newsletter and some training videos. So really go to the Conduct Orientations Help and Learning page. Martha and Emily have put tons of materials on there. And so just make sure that you go in there. And I know we're almost out of time, but there were this is that quick Excel spreadsheet. I think if you want it, this was just that task-based volunteering. So creating, and you can change it with what you need in your orientation. I mean, maybe if you're doing end of stay and pre-departure at the same time, you would need to increase it or assign it. This is an overnight. If you don't do an overnight, I mean, you can tweak it however you want, but it's really nice for volunteers just to be able to plug their name in and say, this is what we're doing and I know what I'm doing. And then it's task-based, which is what we've really tried to do. So I think in the next one is questions, right? Is that what we've got left?
Yeah. Yep.
So there's like two things that I want to mention. I know we're almost out of time, but we started this call with the word consistency. And I don't want anybody to get scared about that. We said consistency. We did not say cookie cutter. We know that orientations are not going to look the same for every team. We just want to make sure the students are getting consistent messages and consistent information all over the country, because you will know as well as I do, they talk to each other. And so making sure we are teaching the same thing. So I had this last year with my own student. Several students were buying cell phones with their SP stipends. And so are we telling students what they're allowed to use that for, kind of thing? Is it consistent around the country? And so it's consistency, not cookie cutter, and making sure that we are giving them consistent information no matter how we're presenting it to them. And so I want you just to know that it's not just everybody's orientation is going to be the same length, the same material, the same kind of thing. It's everybody has flexibility. It's just making sure we have a very consistent message. The other thing is I want to thank all of you for being on this call. I talked about the orientation advisory group. We do this so we can also get feedback from you. It's not just one way. All of those things you put in the chat are now going back to Martha and Emily in the orientation advisory group. Do we need to add things to the materials that you all suggested? So we have heard about is it an emergency or not? And we're going to update that and we're going to use that. And so the non-dominant hand activity, making sure that that's a resource that everybody has, because I love it too. And so it is not just one way. We are definitely going back and forth. Jan, thanks for the shout out. She's going to encourage people to join the advisory group. Jan was on it for several years and then did her tenure and went off of it. But we always love to have new ideas. We would love to have more study abroad volunteers on it. I understand it's 8:01, and if you have to leave, go ahead. Thank you for coming, Allison. But I just wanted to make sure that you all knew that this isn't one way. We're not just talking at you. We just took this as feedback also. And there's lots of things the advisory group now needs to work on.
Absolutely. Were there any questions anyone had? I know we put a lot of information out there and links, and I know you'll have time hopefully in the next few days to digest it, but were there any initial questions or comments?
One quick thing, where do we get more information about that orientation advisory group?
We'll make sure to send more information about that in the follow-up email.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
You're welcome.
I see
Yeah,
Jan
Emily,
asked a question too.
Yeah, the
Yeah, I
15
think
passenger van question, are we allowed to use them?
I'm not sure the right answer to that. Ooh, sorry, Martha just messaged. She said that her connection cut out and it dropped the call for her. I personally don't know the correct answer to that, so I'll make sure to ask and get back to you, Jan.
But I believe that the answer is that we cannot because because of the safety issue with rollovers of the van itself.
Yeah, and
That was my understanding.
That was my understanding as well, but that's kind of an old
Mhm.
model, and 15 passenger vans have changed a lot
Okay.
since that was made. So I'm just wondering, because we're still looking at transportation issues, and I don't think we're going to be able to rent a charter bus this year to get kids to our mid-year orientation. That was almost $4,000,
Oh my.
and so that's just not, it's not even tenable anymore.
I think that's a compliance advisory group question, and I think it may be on their agenda.
All right, well, I'll check as I start looking for transport for January.
There any more questions before we sign off? Everybody look forward, look at your emails. This, like, all the information will be getting sent out. If you have any volunteers that weren't able to make it and would like, you think it would be good for them to watch, the recording will also be available. Yeah, I would be remiss to not mention Martha and Emily, who have done tons of work on all of this new materials. We are super lucky to have them doing all of the, pretty much the grunt work for the advisory group. We just proof it once they're done.
We had a lot of good feedback, and we listened to all our orientation volunteers, so we appreciate all of you.
I just quickly put in help in learning 15 passenger van policy, and it doesn't look like it's approved yet. In 2011, the National Council decided to no longer allow the use of 15 passenger vans.
Yeah, 13 years. It's a long time. I think they've improved.
From someone who works at a school, they're allowing us for the 12s, which is just a little smaller as long as it's the Nissan or the Ford Transit, because they have roll cages. And so I think National Council probably should look at that again. As far as, because they've changed a lot. Most of the ones that you can now rent are ones that do have roll cages, and insurance are letting some of them, but we are skirting by on the 12, but we're about to be able to have the 15 as far as my work. So, all right, I think we're done, Martha. Thank you
Awesome.
all, and we will see you in a few months with another one of these.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.